Hi, I'm Bernard Ma, and I am here with James Fisher from Qlik. James is the Senior Vice President for Strategic Marketing at Qlik, and we are here in London at the Data Revolution Tour. And as you can hear in the background, we are in Westminster, and the Queen and the Duchess of Cornwall just visited the Westminster Abbey next to us, and we will have bells for the next 2 hours, which is perfect for filming.
Wonderful.
Right, so today we want to talk about trust in data, and we've just had the documentary of the Great Hack released, which talks about the Cambridge Analytica scandal and how they've used Facebook data. And I guess this has caused quite a few people lose trust in data and analytics. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that what we saw with the documentary, The Great Hack, was not really so much about two individual organizations, but actually what's more typical of the technology space today, and in fact any organization that's working with data. People are concerned, society is concerned about where data resides, who's using the data that's available to them, and what that data is being used for and where it's going to end up. So it raised lots of really important questions.
So you work with lots of organizations that use data. I help companies design good data strategies, and for me, ethics has to be part of all of this. We have to use data wisely, but also develop this consumer trust. When you work with organizations, what advice would you give them in terms of developing this trust in data and overcoming some of the mistrust around analytics?
Yeah, I think the type of opportunity that we see customers working with, that you work with, that we work with, global organizations, small departmental teams, they're looking for agile data solutions. They're looking to innovate with the data and the analytic tools that are available to them. And if there is mistrust in the way in which we are using data, then ultimately that ability to innovate is going to be controlled by others. We'll lose that freedom to innovate. So I think it's critically important that organizations that are looking to drive value from data are understanding what the rules are, but are also looking to understand what they need to do in terms of data literacy of all consumers of data in their organizations, and how they can leverage technology to manage the use of data, to drive trust in the use of data. Collectively, those three things, I think, are ultimately the foundation for the entire industry to develop more trust in the use of data. And organizations themselves need to build a strategy that's specific for them and to their use cases.
Do you have any good examples that you can share where you feel organizations got this right or have addressed some of the three pillars that you talked about?
Yeah, I think we see lots of organizations around the world that are using analytics and data to drive value from their organizations, typically in four kind of key ways. We see organizations that are looking to use data analytics to get closer to their customer. We call that customer intelligence.
Yeah.
Back to your and I background over a few years ago, we see organizations looking to use data to reimagine business processes. That's much more than just efficiency of a business process, but to completely rethink the way in which we drive a business process because of the use of data. The third area is around new business opportunities. How do we monetize data directly, or how do we use data to deliver new services to customers? Predictive maintenance services are a great example of that we see in automotive, in aerospace as a great example. And then finally, we see more and more organizations looking to use analytics to address this notion of the balance between risk and reward. This kind of started, I think, within financial services, but is much broader in terms of how do we manage risk across the supply chain, how do we manage risk across our ecosystem. So those four areas are really where we see customers innovating to drive value from the data that they have.
And in terms of trust, I guess the customer, understanding customers, delivering a better value proposition to customers is the use case where trust really matters a lot, right? Because if this trust breaks down and people don't want to share their personal data with you, the flow of data gets cut off. So any organization that you feel are getting this wrong or right?
So I think that the challenge that we face, particularly with trust, is that trust is a kind of a double-edged sword, right? There's trust in terms of the external consumer, the customer in your example, and where they see organizations working with the data that's available to them. And look, we've seen many high-profile, data breaches over the years. I'll spare anybody the specific names. That's kind of some examples where perhaps it hasn't gone so well. But trust is also a factor of can we as an organization, individuals within an organization, trust the data that's being made available to them as well, and how they use that data. So it's a double-edged sword, and organizations need to look at both of those components, because if one, you can create mistrust with the consumer by data breaches, very public affairs, or you can make decisions simply on the wrong data and bad data, and that doesn't go well either.
Yeah, and for me, looking at the internal use of data, where you want people to use data to make better decisions, potentially streamline and automate some processes. Again, trust in data is really important there too. Have any tips of how you can improve this to make sure internal employees trust in the data and use it effectively?
Yeah, I think there are two elements to this. The first is that I think we need to use the technology, use the systems that are available to us to prove the lineage of data, to show where data has come from, to explain how an insight derived through AI has been delivered, to give context to that analysis. But the other important thing is really data literacy, and I think that organizations need to focus on driving greater levels of data literacy. Data literacy in most organizations today is where pure literacy was about 100 years ago, so roughly kind of 20-30%. And we've got to move that forward. That's the responsibility of individuals, it's a responsibility of an organization. Here we are in my hometown, London, and it's October and the sun is shining, which is the first time it's done this in 4 or 5 days. If we'd looked at a weather app this morning, and it has said it was going to be completely sunny, it was going to be 32 degrees Celsius, we would probably have questioned that based upon our experiences this week and just what we know about the weather in London in October. And that's context. That's an example of where we challenge the data. We know when we should be asking a question of it. And that in itself, that ability to question data, is a key part of establishing trust in data as well.
Great. So do you have any top tips to leave the viewers with in terms of how they build trust and maybe build data literacy in their organization? Yeah,
I think there are 3 primary things that we need to think about. As organizations, as individuals, as an industry, we need to focus on the rules. We need to put the governance framework in place that creates an industry, a society where there can be broad trust in what we're doing with data. The second is that we need to leverage technology in the right way to make people smarter, to reduce some of the manual drudgery, to automate certain elements of it so people have time to really interpret and understand data. And then thirdly, I think that we need to drive this notion of data literacy. As individuals, we have a responsibility to understand what data exists about us, where that data resides, how it's being used, so we can protect ourselves. But in organizations, in business, we can drive greater levels of data literacy, which will drive greater insight. So understanding, where you are as an individual in your data literacy, going to things like the Data Literacy Project, looking at some of the assessments that are available, but then thinking about how you drive more cultural change in your organization to increase levels of data literacy. That brings this kind of tribeca of elements together around the rules, the technology, and the people, which really can help you lead with data.
Very good. Thank you very much, James Fisher from Qlik. Thank you.
Thank you.